Craig picks up Riders of the Purple Sage because it has a musical title and starts reading it. And he tells me this story about Jane Witherstein out on the Arizona-Utah border in the 1870s. And while he's telling me this story, my vision just fills with Ed Mel's artwork. And Craig said, "This is it. This is the sixth character of this opera, which is the landscape."
We're gonna air all this, by the way, all that stuff you're doing right there.
No,
Yeah.
no, that's so unfair to give me a couple minutes to
I
get
know.
settled. Mark Sublette.
I know. So you
Joker.
want anything else you want to do? That your hair's like, there you go, looking nice.
Okay, well, no, I just woke up like this.
We start off going right away. Let's see if I can get a little more sound going here too. Come on, there we go. How about light? My goodness. Sorry to do this to you. I'm going to air this part on my, oh, wow, that's way better now. Funny how that works. So how are you doing? You okay? You ready to talk, have fun?
Let's do it. Well, I've been waiting years for this conversation.
You have? Actually, that's good. Yeah, I know we talked about this a few years ago.
We did. It's been quite the road with the Riders of the Purple Sage documentary. And we're getting really excited to unveil it to the world. And thank you so much for being a big part of that.
Absolutely. And by the way, for people who are just now tuning in, we have Kristin Atwell Ford in, correct? That's all good. And you're a writer, a producer, an Emmy Award winning ×2. And you can see them if you're watching this on YouTube, the Emmys in the back. So yeah,
that happens.
Yeah, that's, yeah. You know, I'm trying to think if I've had a movie producer on. I can't, no, I don't know if I have or not, probably, but I don't remember. I have, oh yeah, I have had an Emmy Award winning person on.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. Yeah.
Well, you've talked to a lot of people. It's this Art Dealer Diaries, pretty interesting series.
Yeah, did you go and watch any of them just to kind of get a sense of what it was?
I did my research.
Yeah, I figured you would. I mean, you do documentaries, so I would assume you probably did. Yeah, what was your takeaway?
Well, the art world is just such a diverse community. And, you know, if you look at art as an expression of being human or the human experience or what it means to be in this form on the earth, there's really something that speaks to everybody. And that's what I love about art. You know, I have a art history minor from my undergraduate degree. And I learned that art is what you like. I mean, there are all sorts of types of art for all sorts of types of people.
Right.
But if you like it and it speaks to you, that is functioning art. So I love how many different things you're involved with your writing. The Maynard Dixon exhibit at Scottsdale's Museum of the West is just stunning. Is that still up?
Yeah, that's up through I think the middle of August of 2021 for those people that haven't been there. And
you gotta get it. You gotta see. I mean, isn't it one of the most exceptional collections of Dixon's work that has ever been assembled?
That was put together with Trisha Lozier. She's the co-curator with me.
Awesome.
And yeah, she is awesome. And I want to give a shout out to her because she did as much, if not more work than I did. And she'd probably say, yeah, I sure did, you know. And but yeah, it's probably one of the most amount of Maynard Dixons at one time. And, you know, whether we'll see anything like that again and anytime soon is hard to know, because it takes a lot of money, effort, time, energy, and people also just don't want to loan things, you know, like some of these major works, you know, we've had, because of the pandemic, the show's been there for almost 2 years now. So they're not going to loan out again for who knows, you know, maybe 10 years. So yeah, anybody that's out there listening, definitely go see it. I went and just saw it the other day with Ed Mel. Actually, Ed showed up and we went and saw it.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, it was very kind of him to do that. And my son came, and my foster daughter Keeley came, and we all looked at all the art. It was really amazing. Yeah.
It's a great show, and I love the companion book that you put together with the show. And I mean, Dixon's such a major figure when I was studying filmmaking in the Bay Area, I was near the headquarters of Sunset Magazine, and I bought some posters that I really loved, having no idea that they were Maynard Dixon illustrations, but they
Right.
had that three-dimensional depth. And getting to work with Ed Mel years later and understanding the way that Ed reveres Maynard Dixon and how he's influenced his work. We've been really lucky with a lot of our artists who interpret the Southwest. There's a lot of beautiful work.
And how old were you when you were getting those posters when you did that?
It was right after college. So I moved to the Bay Area to study with an Academy Award nominated filmmaker named Dorothy Fadiman.
Mhm.
And we were working on a series on reproductive rights in America. And, it was kind of my first little apartment and everything. And that's the artwork that I chose, was these old Sunset Magazine posters.
And were they all Maynard Dixon's or just some of them, or you don't remember
There
probably?
were two of them. One's kind of reminiscent of, there was a Santa Fe Railway brochure, and I don't know if it was Dixon, but it's reminiscent of that. It's a close-up of a Native American man wrapped in a blanket. And then the one that I really, really loved was, it had two horsemen in the foreground and then a shadow between them in a valley and then a lit up canyon.
Mm.
And that, as being a river runner and someone from Arizona and who spent so much time in the backcountry, that was just my little piece of home in the Bay Area.
Mhm. I totally get this. When I went to college, the first thing I bought was a Ansel Adams Moonrise over Hernandez poster, which I could barely afford. It was a really nice one, and I had it backed so I could put it on the wall, and I still have it somewhere. It's in my garage. I'm waiting to get the original one for my own home, to swap out. But yeah, it was the same kind of thing. It was like, because I was from New Mexico, and I was like, I want this. I need to have this in my life. So it's funny how those kind of things, happen and work. So let's talk about that. I don't really know your backstory, and I kind of like to understand how you got to where you are. And so you grew up in Arizona. Is that where you're from?
I still have you?
Yeah, you do.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Luckily, I talked through that whole process, so we didn't see your face
Perfect. I
going like
just
this.
changed my network because, yeah,
Yeah, no.
yeah,
So you grew up in
thank you.
Arizona? You were born and
I was
raised
born
in
in
Arizona?
Arizona.
Yeah, where?
Yeah, I was born here in Phoenix at Good Sam Hospital. My
Uh-huh.
parents had moved here in '58, and my mom became the romper room lady here in town, Sherry Chesson, and my dad taught American history at Arcadia, Bob Finkbein, and they were real involved with community theater and teaching swimming in the backyard. It was kind of that idyllic, move out from the Midwest and reinvent yourself in the West. And so I'm the youngest of six, and the three of us girls were all born here in Phoenix. And my parents split soon after that, and my mom took us to San Diego. But we came back when I was about 10, and what I would do with my dad's, because he had the summers off, is he would take us backpacking and river running. And so my life became this mix of indoor theater world, in school and in town, which is, this constructed world of artifice, and then being back out in the backcountry, which is as real as it gets. And I really, love both my parents and the way that I've interpreted the world through them. And I feel that they're both present in this film, Writers of the Purple Sage, the Making of the Western Opera.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that. And we're going to talk a lot about that. But
All right.
yeah, because I know that that's the part we need to get to and at some point. But I think I found to understand how someone takes a journey, you kind of have to understand it from the basis. Like, just the river rafting tells me a great deal of, who you are and what you are and how that was instilled in you. And you did all six of you go river rafting?
Well, yeah, my parents had kids for a generation and a half, so my oldest siblings were out and about. But yeah, it was very bonding when we would go out with family. And I was rowing in the Grand Canyon with my dad, and I had one of the other guides say, what do you talk to your dad all day about on a raft? Like, to him, that would be the worst thing possible, to be trapped on a raft all day. And, we talked about history and movies and family and stories. He's very much a storyteller, and he was very influential in my filmmaking sensibilities. When I was 13, we would go out every Friday night and see a film at this classic film series at Scottsdale Center for the Arts.
Hmm.
Now it's Scottsdale Center for the Performing Arts. And so we saw Birth of a Nation and Orphans of the Storm and Charlie Chaplin's Gold Rush and Double Indemnity. And the film that I really, really loved was John Huston's Treasure of Sierra Madre.
Yeah, that's
And this is,
incredible.
as a young teenager, really understanding that the landscape is a place where we can go to test our character, and that it's formative, that it informs us about who we are and who we can be, stripped down from all of the artifice of the city and the world, the social world. But Treasure of Sierra Madre has always been a favorite of mine, and it's a classic in that 40s filmmaking sensibility. I mean, their composition and the way they use light just doesn't get any better than that.
Do you think you were absorbing that kind of stuff at that point in time?
No, it was more about story for me at that time. I've always been a visual person, but I had no language or aesthetic for it. Um, but I do think even at a young age, I was learning how to read film, why suddenly they go to a close-up shot of somebody who you don't think is a player in the story, and then you realize, well, he's the villain.
Mhm.
And you can tell that just by the way that they cut to him, or they plant seeds leading up to the big reveal. um, I came at that all as a consumer and someone who went to the movies with my dad every week. And I mean, I saw movies at a young age that I shouldn't have seen. Like, I don't have a fond memory of The Marathon Man and things like
I
that.
remember that. I saw that with my dad as well.
Really? You probably weren't 8 years old though.
No, I wasn't. But I did see Chainsaw Massacre with my father at a drive-in, and it ruined me for horror movies from that point on. I
That's
did not.
probably a good thing, but
Yeah.
and drive-ins, I mean, what an interesting phenomenon. Drive-ins are back, and we're talking about doing some drive-ins with the writers film, and
Oh,
it's
yeah, that'd be
just,
perfect for that, actually.
yeah, it's big. It plays well.
How many drive-in theaters are there in the Phoenix area? There can't be very many.
There was one down by McKellips and Pima, and I don't even think it's there anymore. I think people are creating pop-up drive-ins, and a lot
Hmm.
of the film festivals are doing that now for social distancing. But it's like taking your couch outside and parking it with a bunch of friends.
Yeah, no, I did drive-ins my whole life, when I was growing up. It was I think it was Monday through Saturday that they would run certain old movies and horror movies and different things. And then Sunday it was all Spanish movies because I grew up in New Mexico. So it was all, the Mexican American movies and things.
What town were you in New Mexico?
It was called Portales. It's called Portales. It's a
Oh,
little town
Portales.
in eastern New Mexico. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
very cool.
yeah, it shaped me as well. That was why I needed the, Moonrise over Hernandez
Yeah,
imagery
you
of New
did.
Mexico, wherever it went. It went with me a lot of different places. And so you're a kid growing up, your dad he's an actual historian. Is that what he
Hmm.
does? Yeah. And what
He was American
specifically?
history.
American history?
Excuse me?
American
Yeah,
history.
he specialized in the Civil War, and he did something interesting in his early classes. Is he wrote a piece about Antietam, and he had some very talented singers in his classes, Craig Strami and his sisters, and he staged this story of Antietam. And the students really related to it in a different way. And I've had a lot of people tell me that he was a very influential teacher because he'd put a date up on the board and he'd say, I can tell you to memorize this date, or I can tell you a story about this date.
Mm,
And he really had a way of humanizing and finding the details of, you know, uh, someone during the Civil War who got a message, and if he had just ridden off, all would have been well. But he was so pissed off by this message, he went in to write a reply, and then he was captured. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the details of it more than that. But he would find details like that where you could relate to it in a human way,
Mm.
and I think that was all very influential. When you collect the pieces of your life that add up to what you did with your life, um, that storytelling, and then storytelling stories around the fire in terms of running river and recounting what had happened in the day and positioning the story and then the payoff or the punchline. um, that's all been really influential, and thank God my mom was a woman who cares very much about community and um, being a contributing member of society. So I ended up with an indoor life as well as an outdoor life.
Yes. And have you followed in any of those things that she was passionate about?
Well,
And
I trained to be an actor, and that was really my focus when I was in high school. I spent 3 summers as an apprentice at the Berkshire Theater Festival in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. And every summer it was a deep study of how production is created,
Mm.
which ironically is exactly what we do in this film about the writers of the Purple Sage Opera. And so I would say, even though this so far has been a tribute to my dad, I'm even closer to my mom in terms of emotional outlook and uh, working with people.
Hmm.
Yeah, she's a really neat lady.
Is she still around?
She is.
Good for you.
She is.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
It's a nice when you used to have that as a sounding board still. So she must have been very excited to see all this too.
I think she's really happy with the choices I've made. She's always been supportive. My mom has always been, she's always had a knack for reinventing herself and a kind of fearlessness to move forward. And she's definitely the person who influenced me to dream big and to be fearless. And, you know, if you fall on your face and you lose it all, and then you get back up and do something else. And that kind of resiliency is something I will always be grateful for.
And you watched it close up, I guess, as far as her having to reinvent herself, right? As far as
Oh,
going to San Diego and all that and getting divorced.
oh yeah. I mean, she left. Well, first of all, she had internationally publicized abortion in 1962, 12 years before Roe versus Wade. She
Oh,
had
wow.
inadvertently taken thalidomide, and it turned into an international firestorm. And she ended up having that termination in Sweden. I believe the day that Marilyn Monroe passed away. And
Yeah.
there's a new book coming out about 1962, and she is in the August chapter with Marilyn Monroe. And so she fought to have me and my sister, who were born after that event. And in that way, she's always been a scrapper in a certain sense. And when my parents got divorced in 74, she left with 6 kids and $700 and went to La Jolla and got her real estate license and started selling real estate. And a decade later, she had 22 properties between California and Arizona. And she and her partner bought Castle Hot Springs, which was Arizona's first resort out in the Bradshaw Mountains. And when the SNLs got deregulated and the real estate bubble burst, she went bankrupt.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, you know, she just, and then she got a job at a radio station and worked for pennies at a radio station and rebuilt from there. She's really an exceptional person. I love my mom a lot.
Wow. Yeah, that's we'll give her a shout out. Let's hear her name so we'll have it.
Okay, Sherry Chesson. Hi, mom.
Because she'll definitely be listening to this, no
Yeah.
doubt.
So
Yeah, that's really interesting. So that background, you can see where it formed you and how you are, Um, when you went to in high school, so you think you're going to be an actress, you get this training, and then and I can tell your mom and probably your dad both were like, go for it, right?
Yeah,
They weren't, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, I can just tell. And so you went for it, and you in college, where did you go to school and what were you getting your degree in at that point?
I went to Stevens College, which is a woman's school in Columbia, Missouri,
Hmm.
right next to Mizzou. And I really ended up there by happenstance. You know, my mom had gone bankrupt and I was going to go to New York. You know, I was ready. I was like, I want to work. And my mom just said, just go to college, you know, just get that under your belt. Then you can do whatever you want. And um, I loved it because suddenly I was getting all of this support for my academic work. And I really had the freedom to explore and learn about whatever I wanted to learn about. I walked out with a, you know, an associate arts degree in art history and religion and a BA in English and women's studies, all self-designed. And I had no idea I was preparing myself for a life as a filmmaker. I was going to go into their theater program, but their theater program had a bunch of tenured um, older gentlemen who would play the husbands and boyfriends and fathers to all the women who were coming through the college program. And I had, you know, I'd worked in this equity house for 3 years in the Berkshires. And I thought, if I'm going to play a political system and work my way up, I want to do that in the real world. I don't want to do it here at college. And I started writing, and I just had the right professors who really nourished me. It's my 30th. It's my 30th reunion this summer, this spring. So I've been thinking about college a lot, and I really loved being at a women's school.
Mm. And so you were doing a lot of writing. Did you write any screenplays or novels or anything at that time? No.
No, I was really an essayist. I mean, that's what people say, that you tend to read what you write, and I love nonfiction. I mean, I'm also an English major, so I'm reading Toni Morrison and Alice Walker and, you know, all of these you know, Zora Neale Hurston, all of these incredibly influential fiction writers. But it was really essays and snapshots and trying to get dialogue right. I I had no idea what I was preparing myself for, other than I wanted a life in the arts.
Mm. Yeah, you knew you wanted that, but not any more than that. You couldn't see it further than that. So what happened? So you finished with your degree, and what do you do with that? Where do you go and what happens?
I went to a program in Portland, Maine called the SALT Center for Documentary Field Studies,
Mm.
and they're dedicated to documenting the region of Maine. And I came, you know, Maine is this land of water. There's more water than there is land. So coming from the desert, just first of all, this was the antithesis of the basin and range landscape that
Okay.
that I know. And I end up way in the upper tip of Maine in Aroostook County, documenting Mexican and Filipino farm workers who've come to bring in a broccoli crop. And Aroostook, Maine was, you know, traditionally it was potatoes and it was big farming families, and then the harvester came in. And, you know, it wasn't anything that I had planned on, but the techniques that they taught us at the Salt Center, we would interview someone and we would record that interview, and then we would sit and transcribe that interview, and then we would write the article around those transcribed bites. So it gave me the mechanics of actually what I do every day as a documentary filmmaker, is using that base interview as, you know, as scripture, as the lodestone of everything that you hang the story on.
And so, and how long did you do that for in Maine? How
Just
long
a
was that?
semester.
One
You know,
semester,
I loved
but it was changing. It was revolutionary for you.
it was exactly the postgraduate training I needed without knowing what I was preparing for. And I was going to stay in Portland, Maine, and then we had an ice storm around Valentine's Day, and I was like, "Ah, I'm out."
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Totally get it. And what, did they do anything with that information on the workers? What happened to that?
Yeah, it's published. It's in their, I believe this is the 1992 edition of their magazine. And my photographer, Amy Tunsing and I got the cover, and it's a feature article. It's like a 4,000 word article. And, and then I came back home to Phoenix. My mother had remarried after being single for 17 years. And I lived with her and my stepdad, Dr. Pent, for a while, and worked in his business. And then my mother was interviewed by Dorothy Fadiman, this filmmaker from the Bay Area. And my mother's very intuitive. And she said, I think you should send Dorothy Fadiman your resume. And I said, yeah, I'm going to send an Academy Award nominated filmmaker my resume, which has no film on it. And Dorothy is very intuitive and very savvy. And she said, why don't you come? I asked her in the letter, I said, is it better to go to film school or to make films? And she said, why don't you come work for me for free and see if you like making films? So that was 1995. I moved to the Bay Area and started for free, and then $6 an hour, and then $8 an hour. And 7 years later, I edited and produced the last film that we worked on together about women's health in India.
Wow. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really interesting. So you spent 7 years working with her kind of hand in hand. And did you go to school as well? You were picking up any classes? Your school was Hard Knocks. You were working with Dorothy Fetterman.
Yeah, and Dorothy is a master at disseminating her film. She works in the PBS system, and each film and each screening, we would do an outreach team, and she's really a community activist filmmaker. And so I learned that model with her. And I learned that, each filmmaker, each shop is kind of a reflection of the personality of the filmmaker.
Mm.
And so I learned Dorothy's style of filmmaking, and Dorothy's the person who taught me that you don't let go till it's right.
Mm.
And that's the way I approach my work. Is it's not, I'm an artist and that's the way it ended up. I consider myself a craftsman, and if the door isn't straight, I take the door down and rehang it.
Mm. Yeah. And you think that probably fit your personality as well? Because I think you'd have to have that kind of personality, right? Because I would be the guy that says, I like it, it's good enough. The door
Right.
kind of
No,
shut.
no, it's the antithesis of the way I was raised. It was, it was definitely like, you know, running river and everything. It's like, let's show up and see what's going on,
Right.
let's see, and not like, let's plan. And my business partner now, Bill Davis, he's the person who's really, really trained me that even though we're making documentary, you make a plan and you shape it and control the action to a certain extent. It's still authentic action, but you do these things to ensure you get the pieces that you need to make a complete story. And so I'm much more of a planner now. And actually, I will say that being a river runner, I think, did contribute to my sense of planning ahead, because once you're in a canyon,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't have everything you need, you go hungry.
Yeah.
So you really have to, I think that did shape me as well. But there's also this play of like, once you're in the rapids, you read the rapid and you push off, and then you have to respond in the moment, which is very much like being on stage.
Right.
You have your training, you make your best plan, and then you get out there and you're present. And so that's how these things work together for me.
And do you have like a beginning, middle, and end that you kind of say, okay, this is what I think's the beginning, middle, and end, and I see the arc of the story, and then you kind of shoot for the middle, and if it happens, great, and if not, then you shoot for it just takes you where the river where it goes. Is that kind of how these documentaries go?
It is, well, there are two styles. I started out in the style of, you go out and you interview everybody and you find the story. You cut and you shape and you find the story in all of this material. What Bill has trained me to do is, even the film we're working on now, we're doing a film about Liberty Wildlife, which is a wildlife rehabilitation center in Arizona, and it's exceptional, the work that they're doing. And especially because we're in quarantine, we started with Zoom interviews. And so I did a pre-interview with everyone to find out exactly what we want, and get a sense of how they'll work into the story. And then you're not making all of this media and all of this material that you may need or may not need. For me, it's a constant struggle between this urge to document. Like, I am a hunter gatherer. Like, I want to know all of the details, and to have that sitting for, 50 years or 100 years when someone comes back and looks at that interview again. Um, Bill constantly works from the other direction, is, ask the 5 questions that are going to work into the script and focus on those. And so we found a happy medium, but the more we pre-plan, the higher quality product we get.
And I would think that one of the biggest things for you, and it would be for me as well, and is going, this is a subject I'm really intense and interested about and willing to spend 2 to 4 years on, more, I don't know. I mean, how do you do that? I mean, I have an idea, but and since you have a partner, you have to both be on the same page with this. I mean, that's a big decision, right? I mean, going in, when you've committed to this is, assuming you're going to finish it, because sometimes maybe you don't, but that's a big deal. How do you, pick that out? How do you determine that?
Well, if you're lucky, there's a lot of passion. I got lucky in my first film was about the Upper Salt River, a place called Quartzsite Falls. And in 1995, some guys went up into a designated wilderness area and they blew up this falls. And for river runners, this place was a mythical place because it loomed so large. It was a place of almost certain death. And you had to get your party around this place safely. And so it became the crux move of every river trip. Of, if you didn't have the skills to deal with Quartzsite Falls, you didn't run the entire river. And so when this was lost, and it had already been designated as a wilderness area, I thought, maybe people don't know what wilderness area means. And I knew nothing about how to make a film, and I just started shooting my first film, and it took me 6 years. It's a 20-minute film. It took me 6 years because it was my graduate school in a sense. And 10 years later, I was lucky enough, from a completely different direction, to be a hired gun for Salt River Project, which, Salt River Project kind of created Central Arizona by creating a reliable water supply by harnessing the Salt River. And when I was a kid running the Salt River, it was like we'd come to the diversion dam above Roosevelt Lake, and that was the end of the trip. And so there was always this like onus of the dam, like the evil dam, is putting an end to our free-flowing river experience. And a decade later, in my indoor life, I
Right.
am writing the story of this dam and how it created the city of my birth.
Right.
And what really, really inspired me during the telling of that story is how much I love the Salt River. I mean, everyone has a river or a waterway that runs through their life. I mean, did you have a river nearby?
No, it was flat and there was a zip. There's nothing. There was a little pond and that was it. Literally
Where
no.
did your water come from?
Down below. It was all from aquifers,
Groundwater?
which is running out quickly for that part of the state, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yes,
I
we
bet.
didn't. We literally had no, and I think that was maybe an issue for me too, because I always wanted to be around water, and there really wasn't. Oasis State Park had a pond, and that was it. But I'm glad you had a river, and I have Sabino Creek here, so I have one now.
Yeah, and Sabino is beautiful, and Sabino Canyon's gorgeous. And so that story of Roosevelt Dam, as I matured into understanding that was the structure that made my being able to call myself in Arizona and being born in Phoenix possible, you just find the things that you relate to personally. And, the question was, how do we make the decisions to take on these projects? Sometimes they choose me, and that's a kind of kismet that I try not to second guess. With Writers of the Purple Sage, the making of a Western opera, I was out to dinner with my husband Dennis, and I were out to dinner with composer Craig Baumler and his husband Rusty for my birthday in 2012. And he starts telling me this story that, they were up hiking in Payson and it's raining. So they decide to go to the Zane Grey cabin in Rim Country Museum.
Right.
And he thought Zane Grey was a visual artist.
Hmm.
And he gets there and he realized that Zane Grey wrote over 90 books, over 60 of them were Westerns. And he essentially created, or we know Owen Wister was the first Western with the Virginian, but Zane Grey popularized the Western form and immediately in 1918 started making films based on his books. So all of those tropes and that language of the Western, so many of those stories are set down, those motifs are set down by Zane Grey to start with. So Craig picks up Riders of the Purple Sage because it has a musical title and starts reading it. And he tells me this story about Jane Withersteen out on the Arizona-Utah border in the 1870s and how she owns the cattle and the water supply for her Mormon town. And her churchmen want her to marry, but she does not want to marry. And while he's telling me this story, my vision just fills with Ed Mel's artwork, like it completely precognitive. I can't even say it was my idea because I just saw Jane Withersteen out in this Ed Mel landscape. And I asked Craig, I said, "Who do you know Ed Mel?" And he said, "No." And I said, "You do, because you've been in a dentist's office or a lawyer's office in Arizona and you've seen an Ed Mel lithograph." And I gave him my copy of Beyond the Visible Terrain. And Craig said, this is it. This is the sixth character of this opera, which is the landscape. And so as Craig and his librettist Stephen Mark Cohen were developing this beloved novel, this iconic novel, into a new opera, I said to Craig, how do you make an opera? I mean, it's this tremendously large art form that encompasses all of these other disciplines. And I just knew right then, I said, do you mind if I make a movie about how you make this opera? Because I was so taken by the subject matter of it being a Western. And I was so touched by seeing the intimate artistic process. The FedEx guy's going to ring the doorbell.
That's okay.
Of the composer and the librettist. And so right then, that's when the project started for me, which is almost 9 years ago now. And Craig was in workshop with the piece. You first, you listen to it with its bare bones and just a piano to make sure that structurally everything's working. And he said, "Do you think Ed Mel might, license us a couple of his skies to use as a backdrop?" And I said, "Well, I had met Ed once because I had worked at a charity, Rancho Feliz, with Gail Peterson, with mother of his children." And I asked Gail, I said, "Do you mind introducing us to Ed and so we can float this idea by him?" And little did we know that Ed kind of had it on his bucket list to design for the stage. And when you look at his art often has foreground, midground, background that is very three-dimensional and that lends itself very well to the stage. And then what I didn't know at the time is that he also collected shadow boxes and these dioramas.
Yes, he does.
Which they're like these beautiful little stages. And I think he said, was there a restaurant in Payson or Prescott that had gone out of business?
Yes, and he got some stuff out of that, and he got a big map of Arizona as well. Yeah, he loves his shadow boxes.
Yeah, and so
very proud of it.
we approached them, and Craig and I went and met with Ed. We didn't even have a world premiere yet. We didn't even have a company. Arizona Opera was helping with the workshops, but we didn't even have a commitment for a world premiere. And we asked Ed about, maybe helping with some backdrops. And he said, well, who's doing your hard set? And, like we're gobsmacked, our jaws on the floor. We walked out of there and was like, so did we just like land one of the most legendary living artists of the 20th century to design the set for this new opera? And Ed, he's the coolest, and he was just, he didn't really know what he was getting into, because he had a whole team that he had to work with who engineered all of the ideas of how we're going to bring this landscape to life. And what we ended up with was, it was supposed to be, hardscape of Ed Mel's mountains, which, you can use in negative space, or you can light them from the front. And there was supposed to be a scrim with projection. And we had Gregory Hirsch, the production director and the lighting designer for Arizona Opera, came in like 6 months before the show went up, like super short time frame. And there was a grant proposal into the Piper Foundation for a new projection system for Arizona Opera. And Greg said, let's go with an LED screen. And Piper Foundation came through. They bought what was at the time the largest temporary install of an LED video screen. So it was about 40 feet by 60 feet. And it's all of these televisions strung together seamlessly to make one image. And that's the unpacking of that equipment 2 weeks before the show went up, and engineering that, and then figuring out how to create the backdrops in the skies to this stage set it's basically like the biggest conflict or obstacle that we have going into opening night of the opera in the film. All good stories need obstacles, so this was a really good obstacles. But the total effect when you witness this film, this opera on stage or in the film, is you have the hardscape of the mountains that can be moved in and out to change location and different dimension. And then you have this backdrop of Ed Mel skies that are moving very slowly and changing. And so essentially this entire play is taking place inside of an Ed Mel painting. And you saw the world premiere. I mean, what did you think of it?
I felt like I was inside an Ed Mel painting. I really did. It was really odd for me because, I live around them anyway. I have tons of them in my house, and but because of the scale, and then you have the music and the motion, it was like a surreal dream in a weird way for me. And then every once in a while, I remember seeing some of the paintings go across, and I was like, I sold that painting. And, and one of them was just a little teeny painting, that was maybe 10 by 18, very small. And then now it's 40 by 60 feet. And it still resonates and it holds up even at that size. It was like, this is amazing. And for me, so the opera really flowed and went very quickly. And it was like, wow, it's over, because it was so, there was this intense emotional gravitas of these images, along with music and movement and talking and everything. That was it was a kind of a three-dimensional experience for me. And I'm not the only one that felt that. I know a lot of people felt that way, especially people that were really loved Ed Mel's paintings. They found it to be quite amazing. And when you were doing your film, I came up and worked with Ed, and it was even more interesting because I got to actually stand next to these huge props or sets and to see them, and I'm standing next to Ed, who's made them, and we're both little tiny ants compared to them. It was, again, very surreal, which you can get the sense in your movie about, how that happened. And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that, because that's really one of the reasons we're having this, is we're going to talk about the movie and that you did, and the streaming, and what's coming up, and how it's going to help actors and different individuals. And maybe you can just let it roll.
Okay, well, let it rip. Well, one of the things for me personally about this film is I got to look at the intimate artistic process of everyone involved in making an opera. You know, everyone trains their whole life and then they give it up in this moment of, 2 or 3 hours of live theater. And that all starts with the landscape. Author Zane Grey, and composer Craig Baumler, and our fine art painter Ed Mell, and set designer, they all have the same inspiration, which is the landscape of the Southwest. So you're getting the synthesis of story and music and visual art that's all inspired by a certain time and place. And so that let me write a love letter to, the Southwest that has shaped me. As the film progresses, we see the director Fenlon Lamb come in, and the conductor Kitaro Harada, and another conductor Joey Makovic, and then the singers and how they construct their roles and relate to the information that they find in the novel, and how that translates to Stephen Marcone's beautiful sparse libretto. And then the musicians come in and we hear the score for the first time with this orchestra of 53 people. And it just builds and builds and builds until we get to opening night. And that art form is really complete when it's witnessed by an audience.
Mm.
And the irony of working on this film, we filmed it over 5 years. It took us 2 years to finish it and license all the music and have everyone honored and happy. And now we're releasing it during a pandemic, right? So we were on the film festival circuit, and we had some really, really lovely experiences, but they're all virtual. You don't get to go and meet people and make those connections. And meanwhile, theaters have been closed. There have been all these COVID closures, and the community that we've featured in our film has been decimated by the pandemic, because not only, when you think of it, a lot of performers and theater workers, what's their second job? Their second job is to work in a restaurant, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had a lot of friends and a lot of people who are involved with the film and the opera who've just had a rough go, and been really struggling maintaining a life in the arts. And before we release this film to international streaming, which in a few months it will be on Amazon and
Mm-hmm.
Amazon Prime and iTunes and all that good stuff, we thought, what can we do with this film that would really benefit everybody? And we are launching on Thursday, March 25th, 2021, a virtual premiere to benefit the Actors Fund. And the Actors Fund has been in an organization, it's a human services organization that's been around since 1882. And they support everyone who makes a living in the performing arts and entertainment, not just actors. So part of our goal with this event, and the film's going to be available at watch.writersoperafilm.com for 2 weeks. It's a $10 ticket. And half the proceeds are going to the Actors Fund, and half the proceeds are going to help us package the film for international streaming and get subtitles in 5 different languages and all of that good stuff. So the Actors Fund is an organization that, they provide pandemic relief, they provide counseling, secondary career counseling. They even have an assisted living center for retired professionals on the East Coast. And really our primary goal with this campaign is to spread the word to singers and musicians and stagehands and theater workers and costumers and people who might not know that that resource is available, that the Actors Fund can help them get through this time.
Wow, that's amazing. And so how long will it be up, from what time again to what time?
The portal at watch.writersoperafilm.com will open on Thursday, March 25th.
The
And
25th.
it'll be open until April 11th. And we're going to do some kind of talk back event in that time with the creative team from the opera and some of the singers.
And they can find that on that website that you've given me
Yeah.
about the other
Yeah,
things about with the actors and things.
Yep, and there's a link to the Actors Fund, so it's a $10 ticket. You can give more if you have more to give. That would be
Right.
lovely. You can go over to the Actors Fund, and they're a 501c3 and do a tax deductible thing over there. But really, there are two things that we want to accomplish is when you go to Amazon and you're like, what am I going to watch tonight? If you don't know that this film, Riders of the Purple Sage, the making of a Western opera, is there,
Right.
it's going to be hard to find. And so, what we've learned in distribution is we have to build our audience. So, we're really mobilizing everyone who's in the film to make a personal request of all of their people. And, from the 70s, they told two friends and they told two friends. And we really want to build a community around the film so it has a life when it's out in public. And that's starting with these 2 weeks that it's going to run as a virtual benefit for the Actors Fund. And then we're very, very fortunate. We're going to be going to Alexander Street, which is an educational distributor, and hopefully be included in, they have a scenic design collection and a performance collection. And I think this film will also have a phenomenal life in the educational realm because you really see the intimate process of all these different artists at work.
Is there a film that's ever been done like this, that's documenting a new opera that's never been, it's a brand new opera? We need your support for the Medicine Man Gallery channel, so make sure to click the subscribe button and tap the little bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video, which we do every morning on Wednesday and Friday. See you soon.